All right. Well, I am so excited to be a part of this panel because everything that I've heard so far has really just been just hitting a lot of you know points for me, especially the hormonal talk this morning. Wow, that was great. And so I'm just going to kind of build off of what's already been talked about. I know we've talked a lot today about some of the issues that can happen with transition for athletes. And so I'm going to be building on that in talking about how the daily routine actually changes and how you can prepare your athlete for that daily routine change and some of the issues that can come with that and what you can do. A little bit about myself. I am a health coach and personal trainer, and now a transition coach for Athlete Soul, which I'm so excited to be part of this nonprofit. And I'm just so excited to be doing this work. And I also wrote a book called The Athlete After, a 10-week guide to balancing life after sports. And what brought me to writing that book is my own experience. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I played Division II basketball at a small university here in Olympia, Washington. And, as a Division II athlete, I definitely didn't have any, ideas that I was going to be going professional or even playing overseas or anything like that. I knew that my end date was coming. And I was preparing for that. And I knew, I thought I knew what I wanted to do next. And I was really developing myself outside of my sport. But what surprised me was when I did get out of my sport and graduated, I still really had a hard time. And a lot of that was, it was both physical and mental. The physical part being I didn't know how to feed myself when I wasn't competing. I always had my meals kind of either ready for me or my roommates cooked. And so, I kind of relied on them and I didn't know what to do. And then also exercise. I didn't know how to work out when it wasn't for training. And that was hard. I'd always had programs given to me. And, you're kind of like, feel like you shouldn't need help in that area, especially since that's what you've been doing your whole life. So that was a really big challenge for me. And then also identity. I thought I knew who I was. I thought even outside my athletic identity, I thought I had pretty much developed that pretty well. But moving to a new city and working with people who didn't see me as an athlete was really, really tough. I realized I had to kind of just rebuild who I was from scratch, and I had a really hard time with that. So I knew that if I was having a hard time as a Division II athlete who, didn't have a career-ending injury and wasn't, going to go professional, wow, Olympic athletes and professional athletes and people who've had their career, taken from them from an injury must have such, a more difficult time. And when I was looking for resources, I just kind of had to piece, all these things together from all these different resources. And I realized that there just wasn't a lot out there for people who were struggling, with the whole picture. And we talked, I've heard from people today talking about, we need to focus on the entire athlete. It's not just the career development, the financial aspect, in terms of the transition, but it's about the whole person, the whole well-being of the person. And there just really wasn't anything out there. And I realized that, I could help fill the gap. And that's kind of where my passion was with health and wellness. So I switched careers into that. And that's where, I ended up writing my book. And so I'm going to my book breaks it down into food, body, and mind. And so that's kind of the structure I've given this presentation. It's just a little bit of background. So let's talk a little bit about the general, change in routine. We've already kind of talked about the issue, so I won't go into a ton of details in repeating what people have said so far, but the lack of structure is huge for athletes. Luckily for Athlete Soul, I've been able to interview a ton of different athletes. I don't know if you guys have gone to our website, but we have a lot of different athlete stories up there about their challenges, individual struggles. And something that I hear from every single person is the change in their structure is probably the biggest challenge for everybody. Knowing day after day for years and years and years, exactly what you need to do. you've got this side set of time for breakfast, and then, training, practices, games, traveling, meal times, even down to showering. I had one athlete who, he said after this was his career was over, he didn't even know when to shower. And it was like everything, he was just so lost. So we have everything down to a structure, and we have our, set up for our next goals and everything. And so to have that gone can be really, really tough. With that can come inactivity. There's almost a feeling of you almost have so much time that you maybe don't even do anything with it because it's just like so confusing. I know a lot of people have talked about how they have maybe gone, in a different spectrum, in a different area of the spectrum of working out even more than they were when they were training. But some people go the opposite and they actually stop training altogether. And that can be a pendulum. It was for me. I stopped for a few months and, really saw some bad effects from that. And then I was like, oh my gosh, okay, what's missing in my life is the exercise that I was getting. So then I went completely opposite. I was like, going crazy. I was going to the pool at 4 a.m. for a couple hours before I biked, 15 miles round trip to work every day. And I kind of just went the complete opposite, and that wasn't good for me either. And so I kind of just kept going back and forth on this pendulum swing, which really affected my hormones, which, was talked about earlier as well. So it became a health issue. A lack of purpose, when you're training for so long for your sport and your goals, and then all of a sudden that's gone, there is that huge, like, what now? What am I here for? Who am I? Realization. And then change in environment and relationships. When you're around your team all the time, around your coaches, around the staff that supports you, and then now all of a sudden you're not there. Maybe you've moved to a different city, or you've moved back home with your family. There's a huge shift there. You've left one family behind for another family, and that's where the relationships come in. And not only just losing that day-to-day relationship that you have with coaches and players and such, but also your friendships and your familial relationships can change as well. I talked to some athletes that were saying that they didn't have anything to talk to people about anymore because they would just talk about their sport, and people didn't know what else to talk to them about. And they didn't feel worthy or confident in those conversations. So it really affected them socially. Or even, for me personally, my parents didn't really know how to support me when it wasn't in my sport. So I felt like I actually lost a huge part of my relationship with my parents. And so there's just there's a lot of aspects, and it's different for everybody. And so part of this conversation is talking about the individual athlete and making sure you're, opening up a dialogue with what each individual is going through, because it's going to be so different. Possible feelings, the restlessness of not having a schedule. It's really, really hard when you're used to going 100 miles an hour to go to 0 miles an hour. And I think a lot of us have felt that with COVID. It's almost like you're just wandering around and you don't know what to do. It's hard to sit down and relax, or just to sit down and not do anything. It's really, really tough. And that can produce some anxiety. The lack of purpose can cause depression, identity crisis, and also physical health issues that we've already talked about. And so what can you do as a coach, or as, an organization, or whoever, you are, an agent or staff member? I think we can build on what Erin was talking about. I think what she talked about in terms of, preparing an athlete over the course of their journey is really, really, really important. I definitely think that is key. But I also think that, there needs to be, kind of almost like a conclusion talk. And I called it a transition talk with an athlete. Because a lot of these athletes feel like they don't have closure, that they didn't have any guidance going into their next part of their journey. And they're just kind of like left floating in the wind. So I think having a transition talk with an athlete can be really, really helpful. And with that, opening up a dialogue, not just sitting down with them and just handing them a bunch of information and saying like, cool, see you later, but really asking them questions, because you know, there's a lot of athletes who probably haven't thought about this next step in their life, or they think, okay, well, I'll just deal with it when it comes up. And then they don't realize that they're going to be struggling until like 6 months later, or 3 months later, or a year later even. So opening up a dialogue and really having them think about what they're going to be doing and voicing it out loud. And if they don't have answers, making them realize that, okay, I do need to do some planning. I do need to figure this out before, you know, they become depressed from it all. So opening up a dialogue is really important. And then having materials and references ready for them that are specific to your sport and perhaps your local area of what, you know, resources are available there. And also, I mean, it's going to be different depending on what level where you are. So, and then following up is so, so important, because a lot of athletes are feeling like if the organization or coach or whoever is just really concerned about, you know, the end goal, and then athletes retire, and then it's like, okay, it's on to the next. And you almost feel like, okay, well, what am I, chopped liver now? You know, like they never hear from you again. If there's not really a strong alumni network or anything like that, it can feel really, you can feel excluded. And it's like, man, you've given your blood, sweat, and tears to a program and to your sport, and then to feel like you're not even part of the community anymore once you're done. It's really, that can be really difficult. And so even just following up with those athletes a couple times once they retire can make an athlete feel connected, and also feel like they have your support and that you care about them, which I know that's the whole reason that anyone is watching this, is because you want to be athlete centered in your coaching, and that's really special. So thank you for being here. So first, let's talk about food. And so questions that you can ask your athlete is what their current relationship is with food, and if they know how to or like to cook food. You know, everyone has a different relationship with food, and it also depends on the type of athlete. I mean, is this a football player who has been used to, you know, stuffing as much food as possible into their body so that they can maintain, you know, a large physique? Or is this person a dancer or gymnast that's had to be really, really careful with everything that they put in their body? What is their relationship? What is it going to look like for that person when they move forward? Are they going to have to reduce their calorie intake, or are they going to be eating more food? You know, what does that look like for them? And do they have a healthy relationship currently? Where have they been getting their food? Has their food been provided for them their entire career? Or do they already provide for themselves? Is that not an issue? Because if someone's had their meals provided for them and then all of a sudden they don't, I mean, it's going to be a really big shock. Like, what do I even make for myself? That was totally my experience. I did totally learn how to cook afterward using YouTube. So hopefully that's not the case if you can prepare people in advance. So what you can do is, if you already have a team nutritionist or somebody talking to your athletes about food, have them do a talk about nutrition needs and how that will change when they retire. And then also having a handout with meal suggestions. Just what does a daily, you know, what does a day look like to be healthy as like a normal adult? What does that look like? Because it's hard to know when you have never been just a normal person. You've always had to do specific meal intake for performance. And then also suggest a continued regular eating pattern. You know, making sure people eat breakfast, that it's important, that, you know, still having a consistent meal times is really, really important. And then exercise. Questions you can ask: how will they continue getting physical activity? Are they going to join a gym? Are they going to be working out at home? Are they, you know, just going to be running, you know, around their neighborhood? Are they going to be trying a new sport or activity, like yoga or CrossFit or triathlons or marathons or whatever? Are they going to be working towards a new goal? Are they still going to be competitive? that can be really important for athletes, is continuing that, working towards a physical goal, because up until this point, there's a reason they've been working out. There's a reason they've been following these programs. And when that's taken away, it's really hard sometimes to have that accountability, or to have that thing that you're training for. Like, why am I even doing this? Why am I even going to the gym, for an hour a day? What purpose is there? And also, what do I do when I'm not training for something? Do I lift dumbbells? Do I ride a bike? What do I do? So talking that out and having a plan is important. What you can do is recommend a deceleration plan and remind athletes that it's not good for somebody, especially at the elite level, to just completely stop working out. That can be, a recipe for heading into a depressed state when you're not getting the dopamine that you once were. The hormonal changes are important there. So having a deceleration plan, and also discussing with them that, it's okay if you're working out, if you get a workout for 20 minutes in a day, that's still enough. 3 hours that we're used to, or that was what I was used to, but I'm sure, a lot of athletes are used to more than that even. They're trying to go from working out hours and hours a day to, when can I fit in any exercise at all, if they, move into a new career and they have a family or what have you, or it's really difficult to not continue at that pace. And so having a plan and talking about how it is okay to be just, biking to work. That's great. That's more than a lot of people get, so discussing that and normalizing that. And then providing ways physical activity can be integrated into their daily routine, discussing with each individual what that looks like for them, and goal setting that aligns with their new lifestyle. And then sleep is so, so important. Sleep really holds everything together. What you can ask your athletes what their current sleep pattern is. Do they currently have a healthy sleep pattern? This also kind of goes back to that hormonal talk as well. There's so much that has to do with balance when you are sleeping, the right amount. And what will they do to maintain a healthy sleep schedule? It's really easy when you don't have anything going on to fall into that watching Netflix to all hours of the night, and staying on your phone, and then sleeping in, and then missing breakfast, and then being tired, and then relying on caffeine. And then, it's just like, it's a slippery slope, and that can cause some issues. So what you can do is suggest that they limit stimulants, such as screen time and caffeine. A lot of times when I'm working with athletes post-sport, we end up setting a alarm on their phone that says at 10 o'clock or something, set an alarm that says, okay, screen time's done, put everything away, start winding down and getting ready for sleep, so that they have that deadline. And then suggesting they continue to go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, even if they don't have something specific to wake up for. It's still important in maintaining a healthy schedule. And then identity and purpose. Where that fits into structure is really like, what is going to be filling their days now? They've been putting so much into their sport, and majority of their time has been spent on that. And now there's a huge, huge gap in their schedule. And so what is going to be taking up that time? How are they going to find balance? So you'll see this graphic here. And this is an athlete soul graphic that I love so much. Because kind of the point of this graphic is that, your authentic self is the palm of the hand, and that, explaining to an athlete that their identity is not just their athletic self, that their athletic identity is just part of the equation, and that there's these, they have different identities as well. We all do. We have our identity with our friends and family. We have our, hobbies. We have vocation, or that is, going to be what's next for them. and also our spiritual, religious identity as well, if that's something that is important to the person. So there are so many identities that we have as a person. It's not just our athletic self. That's just what we've been spending all of our time developing at this point. So now, how do these other identities play into our day and into our schedule? And what you can do is either provide your athlete with a planner or calendar, or just recommend that they use, their digital device that has a calendar, so that they can map out their days to stick to a routine. And so here I have a couple just suggestions that I just pulled offline. So I'm one of those people that just like loves to have a physical planner, and like, I go crazy. I do like stickers and like, quotes and all of that. It helps me stay motivated to get through the day. But you don't necessarily need that. But what I really like about a lot of planners these days is that there's spaces for goal setting, to-do lists, meal plan, and then also having that hour by hour plan as well. Or, if that's not really people's jam, using your device is also really helpful to having that schedule. And when you talk to your athletes about planning a schedule, I really recommend having like every single thing in there, not just, a meeting or, a workout or what have you, but like every single thing. Breakfast, if they're working on, if they don't have a career yet, to take up their day, like a 9-to-5 job or something like that, block out time that you're actually going to spend working on that, whether it's networking or working on resumes or looking for jobs or whatever it is. And then also blocking out time for relaxation. That is actually really important, because for somebody who's been going, it's really hard to just sit down and relax. And if you can plan that into your day, you give yourself permission to rest. And it's really hard. Athletes have a really, really hard time giving themselves permission to rest. And so that carries over into their retirement as well. Relationships and environment. This is kind of like the last thing that you can talk to them about. Questions to ask them: who will they be living with? Are they going to be living alone? Are they going to be living with others? And I think that especially in this first part of the transition, that's really important, because that can be part of their issue of whether they have a support system or not. Athletes you put on a brave face and can suffer in silence sometimes. And if they're living with someone, it can be really helpful for that. But if they're living alone, it can make it even more difficult to stick to a set structure and routine. So figure that out, figure out, what is their living situation? Do they have a strong support system? Who can they go to if they're having a hard time? What you can do is connect them with, fellow alumni or network for athletes, that they can not only talk to about the transition and maybe hardships they're having, but also about, possible careers, or, making those connections to figure out what has worked for other athletes. What have they followed? Are they passionate about their jobs? What might work well for them? I think Erin had talked about, setting up an accountability partner with a teammate and setting them up with somebody who's going through the same things, to be a rock for each other, to be able to check in with each other every week and see how they're doing. Or setting someone up with a mentor or a coach or specialist or former teammate who maybe went through those specific challenges. If someone is specifically dealing with a career-ending injury, for example, maybe setting them up with somebody that can help them through that specifically, or somebody who's gone through that, so that they have somebody to talk to. And then I think what's really important is following up. And, I was going through my presentation with my husband last night, and he's a high school coach. And I realized that, we're kind of talking about higher levels of athletics than just high school and youth sports. But what's really interesting is this hit home for him the most. And he really, really, really puts effort into following up with his athletes once they're finished, especially athletes that were expected to continue at a higher level and perhaps they didn't make it. He really makes sure to continue that relationship with them to be somebody that they can fall back on. You know, as an athlete, you give so much of yourself. I mean, you're working to impress your coach and work for your coach every single day. And then all of a sudden when it's over, you feel like it's almost like you've lost I mean, to me, it felt like I lost a parent almost. And so just following up with someone, even just once, you know, a few months down the line, a quick phone call can make such a difference for an athlete, and feeling that they're supported and that you care about them and that they're still part of the program. You know, and then also if they do need help, you know, perhaps they're not talking about it with anybody else. And if you can offer, you know, help with anything, connecting them with somebody who can maybe help them, it can be a game changer. And so I just wanted to say that if you are thinking about bringing in different materials or, you know, educational resources for athletes, or you're not really sure where to start, Athlete Soul has a complete multiple pages of resources that you can include in your, you know, let's say you make a folder or something for an athlete that you can give to them in that transition talk. There is a ton of resources there. And then also resources if they need additional help with the transition. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Katie. That was great. I really like all the talk that you had on the exercise side and the sleep. We haven't touched very much on sleeping and daily habits, so I think that was awesome. We're gonna bring Katie on in a few minutes, but I just wanted to raise here something that you said, or like sort of react to something that you said, because we talked about exercise, nutrition, sleep, all these great things that we're asking athletes to continue to do when they're retired. And it's hard to continue to do that when you don't have the structure around you. But I think it really starts with providers and coaches and people around you by having them walking the talk first. Like if we have coaches that actually eat well and take the time to take their meal rather than being on the side of the court like in a hurry, and sleep properly and don't abuse caffeine and actually take the time to exercise, I think that does wonders to like encourage athletes to do the same thing. So not only we want the athletes to be aware and doing that, but I think having everybody around them also considering their personal wellness and their personal lifestyle, so that they can be a good role model when it comes to the athlete. And that's sort of at every level, right? Whether it's high school or college or even more at the elite level as well. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And on, you know, kind of adding to that, something that I meant to say was, you know, in building on that alumni relationship, I think it's so important to, for both sides, for the competing athlete and for the retired athlete, to have those connections. If it's possible for a coach to like have some alumni events where they're mixing together, or, you know, have that ability to build that relationship, it helps not only the current athlete to see that alumni being successful and what they're doing, and also building a relationship to have that communication with them afterward in that transition, but also for, you know, the alumni to be able to feel like they have a part in this community, and to continue having a hand in that community. Because when you feel like you no longer are part of that community, you can feel so excluded. And so I think having that, not only your coach as a role model, but also having that alumni connection and seeing those, you know, alumni as role models as well. It can really help in getting the athlete to think about, okay, what am I going to do? This is what these people are doing. I see them being successful. It gets their brains kind of turning. But they can see some healthy individuals that are able to take care of themselves and are, you know, successful beyond sports. And I think that just helps. I think it can only help on both sides. So.
Absolutely. And this is the built-in community. So we want, you know, everybody to continue to be part of it and not have that gone. I think one thing that we like to say often, what relate to that identity part is, you know, you're an athlete, you continue to be an athlete your whole life. Even if you're a former athlete, you will still sort of consider that identity as pretty important for yourself, and that means being part of that community as well.